A starving man steals a loaf of bread, and for that one loaf, the law takes 19 years of his life. When he finally walks free, no inn will feed him, no barn will shelter him, and every door in town is bolted against the yellow passport that marks him forever as a convict. Then one house takes him in anyway. That night, he repays its owner, a bishop, by stealing his silver and vanishing into the dark. And when the police drag him back by the collar, certain they have caught a thief red-handed, the bishop does something that will detonate across the next 20 years of his life, across a whole novel, across 2 centuries of readers. He tells the police the silver was a gift, presses 2 more candlesticks into the astonished man's hands, and sends him back out into the world with a debt he can never repay. This is Les Miserables, Victor Hugo's sprawling, furious, tender epic of 19th century France, and it begins with a single question that will not let go for the next 1100 pages. If the law has already decided who you are, can a single act of mercy make you someone else? The man's name is Jean Valjean. What the bishop just bought, with 2 silver candlesticks, is his soul. What Valjean does with it is the rest of this story. The novel is Les Miserables, published in 1862 by Victor Hugo, the most famous writer in France, and by then an exile from it. Hugo had spent nearly 20 years in political exile on the Channel Islands, banished for opposing the dictator Napoleon III, and he wrote much of this book in that exile, pouring into it every ounce of his rage at a France that criminalized poverty, crushed women for the crime of being poor, and threw children onto the street to fend for themselves. Hugo did not invent this world from imagination. He had seen a real man arrested for stealing bread, had researched the actual grinding machinery of the French penal system, and had watched the July Revolution and the failed uprising of 1832 with his own eyes. The novel we are about to walk through in 5 beats is not really about one man's redemption, though it is that too. It is Hugo standing in the wreckage of his century and asking, with everything he has, whether a society that manufactures its own criminals and then punishes them forever has any right to call itself civilized. He gave the book a title that is really a diagnosis: Les Miserables, the wretched, the miserable ones. Not a description of a few unlucky people, but an accusation aimed at the whole social order that produces them. Here is the whole novel in one sentence. An ex-convict is brought back from a wasted life by one act of mercy, and spends the rest of his days paying that mercy forward, even as the law, in the person of one relentless policeman, refuses to believe that a criminal can ever truly stop being one. Everything else in this vast book, the factory towns, the ruined mother, the orphaned child, the students dying behind a barricade in the streets of Paris, orbits that single tension: grace against law, mercy against judgment, the belief that people can change against the belief that a record, once written, can never be erased. We will walk it in 5 beats: the bishop's candlesticks, the ruin of Fantine, the rescue of Cosette, the barricade, and the policeman who could not live in a world with mercy in it. First, the bishop's candlesticks. Jean Valjean was not born a hardened criminal. He was a poor labourer who broke a baker's window for 1 loaf of bread to feed his starving sister's children, and for that he served 5 years, then 14 more, for repeated escape attempts, each one adding to a sentence that swallowed 19 years of his life. He comes out of prison with an ex-convict's yellow passport, a title that follows him everywhere, and a heart, Hugo tells us plainly, that has hardened into something close to hatred for the world that did this to him. Every inn turns him away. Even a dog's kennel is closed to him. Only one house takes him in, the home of Monseigneur Bienvenu, a bishop who has given away every comfort of his office to the poor, and who welcomes this exhausted, dangerous-looking stranger to his own table without a flicker of fear. That night, Valjean repays him by stealing the household's silver plates and slipping into the darkness. The police catch him within hours and drag him back to the bishop's door, certain of their case. And the bishop, without missing a breath, tells them the silver was a gift, then turns to Valjean and asks why he forgot to take the best pieces, the 2 silver candlesticks on the mantel, pressing them into his hands in front of the stunned gendarmes. Once the police are gone, the bishop speaks the words that will echo through the rest of this story. Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil, but to good. It is your soul that I buy from you. I withdraw it from black thoughts and the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God. Valjean walks out of that house a changed man, though it will take him years, and one devastating relapse into old habits, to understand what has actually happened to him. He has just been given something the law never offers, a second version of himself. Second, the ruin of Fantine. Years pass. Valjean has broken his parole, taken a new name, Monsieur Madeleine, and built himself into an honest, prosperous factory owner and even the mayor of a small town, quietly using his fortune to help the poor without ever revealing who he really was. Working in his own factory is a young woman named Fantine, who has a secret that would destroy her reputation in an instant. An illegitimate daughter, Cosette, whom she is paying an innkeeper couple, the Thénardiers, to raise in the countryside while she works. When jealous co-workers expose her secret, the factory forewoman fires her on the spot, and Fantine spirals downward with a speed that Hugo makes almost unbearable to watch. She sells her beautiful hair for money. She sells her front teeth, and finally, starving, freezing, and desperate to send the Thénardiers enough money to keep her daughter fed, she sells the only thing left, herself, becoming a prostitute on the streets of Montreuil-sur-Mer. It is here that the story's second great force enters, Inspector Javert, a police officer who believes in the law the way other men believe in God, with a certainty that has never once bent. When a gentleman abuses Fantine in the street and she strikes back in self-defense, Javert arrests her, not him, and only Valjean's intervention as mayor saves her from prison. But the damage is already done to her body. Consumption is eating her alive, and she is dying by the time Valjean, racked with guilt over what his own town did to her, promises to fetch her daughter. Then comes a test that has nothing to do with Fantine at all, and everything to do with who Valjean really is. The police believe they have finally caught the real escaped convict, Jean Valjean, a wrongly accused vagrant named Champmathieu, about to be sentenced for a crime that is actually Valjean's own past. Valjean could stay silent forever and let an innocent stranger take his place. Instead, he walks into the courtroom and stops the trial cold, telling the astonished judges, "He is not the man whom you are in search of. It is I. I am Jean Valjean." He saves a stranger's life at the cost of his own freedom, and returns straight to Fantine's side, only for Javert to burst in and arrest him there, announcing it in front of the dying woman. "I tell you that there is no Monsieur Madeleine, and that there is no Monsieur le Maire. There is a thief, a brigand, a convict named Jean Valjean, and I have him in my grasp." Fantine, told in the same breath that her daughter is not there after all, falls back on her pillow and dies on the spot. Valjean turns on Javert with a fury we have not seen from him since the theft of the candlesticks, and says only, "You have murdered that woman." Third, the rescue of Cosette. Valjean is dragged off to the galleys, escapes again in a feat of near impossible strength and daring, and disappears. And the very first thing he does with his freedom is go looking for Fantine's daughter. He finds her in the Thénardier's inn, and what he finds is not the well-cared-for child Fantine believed she was paying for. Cosette is 8 years old, dressed in rags, while the innkeeper's own daughters wear ribbons. Worked like a servant from before dawn, sent alone into a dark forest at night to fetch water she can barely carry, terrified of every shadow. Valjean meets her on that forest path, silently takes the heavy water bucket from her small hands, and something in him that has been frozen since the bishop's mercy begins, for the first time, to thaw all the way through. He pays off the Thénardiers, who resist bitterly, but cannot resist money, and carries the child away into the night, and from this point on, the two of them belong to each other completely. An escaped convict and an abandoned little girl, each the only family the other has. He raises her in hiding in Paris, moving from address to stay ahead of Javert, who has never stopped hunting him and never will, giving her an education, a warm home, and the tenderness neither of them ever received as children. Cosette grows up believing her adoptive father is simply an eccentric, gentle old man, never guessing the years of prison, the stolen silver, or the dead woman whose last wish he is quietly, completely fulfilling with every year that passes. Fourth, the barricade. Cosette grows into a young woman and falls in love with Marius, an idealistic law student who has drifted away from his wealthy royalist grandfather and into the orbit of a group of young revolutionaries dreaming of a better France. In June of 1832, that dream collides with reality. A popular general's funeral turns into a spontaneous uprising, and Marius's friends throw up a barricade in a narrow Paris street, determined to die, if they must, for a republic they will never live to see. Among the boys defending that barricade is Gavroche, a street urchin of maybe 11 or 12, who has raised himself wild and free on the pavements of Paris, unknowingly the Thénardier's own abandoned son, cheerful and utterly fearless under fire. When the barricade's ammunition runs low, Gavroche climbs over the top into the open street, in full view of the National Guard's rifles, singing as he strips cartridge boxes off the bodies of fallen soldiers and tosses them back over the wall to the defenders, treating a battlefield like a game invented purely for his own amusement. He is warned again and again to come back. He does not. A first bullet only grazes him, and he sings on, mocking the very soldiers shooting at him. A second bullet does not miss. He falls face down on the pavement and does not move again, and Hugo closes the scene with a single, devastating line. This grand little soul had taken its flight. Valjean, who has come to the barricade to protect Marius for Cosette's sake, survives the massacre that follows and carries the badly wounded young man out through the sewers of Paris on his own back, choosing, once again, to save the very people who could destroy the peaceful life he has built. Fifth and last, the policeman who could not bend. Coming up out of the sewers, exhausted and carrying Marius's unconscious body, Valjean finds Javert waiting for him at the exit and asks for 1 hour, only one, to deliver the young man to safety before he is arrested. Javert, astonishingly, agrees and even helps him find a carriage. It is the first time in his entire career that Javert has bent the rule of law by so much as an inch, and it breaks something inside him that nothing in his life had prepared him to survive. Everything Javert has ever believed rests on one unshakable idea. A man is either lawful or a criminal forever, with nothing murky in between. And he has just watched an escaped convict spare his life at the barricade earlier that same night, then trusted that same convict's word rather than dragging him in immediately. Standing alone afterward on a bridge over the Seine at night, Javert cannot make his own rulebook add up anymore. He beheld before him 2 paths, both equally straight, but he beheld 2, and that terrified him. A man who has organized his entire existence around never having to choose between 2 straight paths finds himself, for the first time, facing exactly that choice, and finding no way to take either one without destroying who he has always believed himself to be. He cannot arrest the man who saved his life and the lives of others out of pure goodness, and he cannot simply let a convict go free, not without betraying every year he has given to the law. Unable to live in a world where mercy and justice are both true at the same time, Javert takes off his hat, sets it on the edge of the quay, and steps off the parapet into the dark water below. The most rigid man in the story is destroyed not by Valjean's crime, but by Valjean's goodness. By a mercy his entire worldview had no room to hold. Marius recovers, marries Cosette, and only afterward learns the truth of who saved his life in that sewer. By then, Valjean, old and failing, has quietly withdrawn from their household, rather than burden their happiness with a convict's shadow. Until Marius finally understands what the old man gave up and rushes with Cosette to his side before it is too late. Dying in a small rented room with the 2 silver candlesticks still burning on the table beside him, Valjean tells them the one thing he has learned across an entire lifetime of hiding, running, and quietly giving everything away. Love each other well and always. There is nothing else but that in the world. Love for each other. So what does all of it add up to? Strip away the barricades and the sewers and the 19 years in chains, and Les Miserables keeps returning to one image, a debt of mercy passed from hand to hand that never stops moving. The bishop buys Valjean's soul with 2 candlesticks and asks nothing back except that he become an honest man. Valjean spends the rest of his life paying that debt forward to people who can never repay him either. To Fantine, whose dying wish he fulfills at the risk of his own freedom. To Cosette, a stranger's child he raises as his own. To Marius, the very young man who will one day marry the daughter he loves, carried on his back through the sewers of Paris. And standing against every one of these acts is Javert, who is not a villain so much as a man who has confused the law with the whole of morality, and who cannot survive the moment he learns those 2 things are not the same. Hugo's argument is not that the law does not matter. It is that a law with no mercy in it eventually breaks the very people who serve it most faithfully, while a mercy passed hand to hand keeps rescuing people the law had already given up on. Valjean spends his whole life being handed a debt he cannot repay, and discovers that the only way to repay it is to keep handing it to someone else. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Somewhere near you, right now, is a person the world has already filed away as a lost cause. The co-worker everyone has quietly given up on. The relative reduced to their worst year. The stranger whose one bad decision has become the only story anyone tells about them. Les Miserables argues patiently across 1100 pages that this filing is almost always wrong, and that it takes only one person refusing to accept it to prove that. The bishop did not lecture Valjean about his crimes. He handed him candlesticks and a way out. This week, look for your own version of that gesture. Not a grand rescue, just the ordinary, specific mercy of treating someone as what they could become rather than what they have already been labeled. It costs you something, the way it cost the bishop 2 candlesticks he did not have to give. Give it anyway. Victor Hugo spent nearly 2 decades in exile writing one long argument that no law, no court, no yellow passport gets the final word on who a person is. Only what they choose to do with the mercy they are given. Jean Valjean was handed that mercy once by a bishop who expected nothing back, and he spent every year afterward proving it was not wasted on him. If this walk through Les Miserables gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we go all the way back to the beginning of Western storytelling itself, to the walls of Troy and a rage that starts a war. Homer's Iliad. And tell me in the comments, who in your life needs the candlesticks, not the sentence?